Okay, tonight we start reading Dragon Blood Pirates, Death Diamond. Looks exciting. There's a little map here at the start of the book. That's a glossary. Here we go. Prologue. Al Breyer's arms tingled. His feet were wet, bewildered. He opened his eyes and stared in shock. What was he doing on a rock in the middle of the ocean? Then his friend Owen Seabrook began to appear beside him, shimmering ghost-like for a moment before becoming solid. Owen's eyes bugged in disbelief as he looked around. Where are we? I have no idea, Al said. He rubbed his eyes. Only seconds ago, he and Owen had been playing in his attic at number 5 Drake Drive. They'd been drinking cola, and Al's dad had been yelling at him to come downstairs and do the dishes. But Al hated doing chores, and besides, he'd been more interested in the big rusty key he'd just found. When he'd tried the key in the lock of the old sea trunk that had once belonged to his grandfather, the mysterious chest had opened. The sea trunk had been empty, but there was a map of some strange islands drawn on the base. The word treasure had leapt out at them, so Al and Owen had leant into the trunk to have a closer look. Suddenly, Al had felt his body go all odd and goosebumpy. He'd clutched the key in his hand and shut his eyes. Now he was stuck with his best friend in the middle of the ocean on a small rocky outcrop. What's that? Owen's eyes bugged out even further. Before them, a white and ghostly cat appeared. Within seconds, the animal solidified just as Owen had done, wobbling slightly on 3 legs. Its weird purple eyes shone in the sunlight. Then, apparently terrified, it leapt into Al's lap. Mewing pitifully, Al put the rusty key in his pocket and patted the distressed creature. The tide came in, and waves swirled around the rock, coming closer to their feet. The boys also noticed a strange green shadow in the water, circling slowly around them. Then a fin cut the surface, and Al's eyes widened in fear. "Oh no," he cried, "a shark." The giant creature came so close they could see its cold eyes glowing with menace and green phosphorus mould growing on its ancient skin. "Help!" Owen and Al screamed. The frightened cat clung to Al's tracksuit, to his tracksuit pants, and howled alarmingly, its wail carrying over the waters. Just as the waves were lapping at their feet and the shark was sizing the boys up for a dinner, Al and Owen sighted a sail in the distance. After a few minutes, the boat sailed right up to them and dropped anchor. "It looks like an old Christopher Columbus boat," said Al, waving frantically to the several scruffy men peering down at them from the ship's rails. "It's called the Booty," said Owen, as the ship's patched sails were hauled down and the lifeboat launched. Seeing the monstrous green shark circling the rock, the men in the lifeboat beat the water with their paddles. The shark thrashed its tail and headed out to sea. Al and Owen were rescued. Chapter 1, Pirates. "Maggoty biscuits," said Al in disgust, staring at the plate set before him in the ship's galley. "Don't you want your dinner?" asked a barefoot boy. "No, thanks," said Owen. A tattooed man wielding a knife leered at Owen and Al menacingly. "You'll be sorry," he said. The barefoot boy grinned, picked up one of the biscuits and bit into it hungrily. "Don't take any notice of Slicer," he said. "My name's Mahout. I'm the cabin boy, and let me tell you, there's not much food left. We haven't found any treasure, you see." "Treasure?" Al asked, bewildered. "We've been sailing through the Dragon Blood Islands for months now," said Mahout. "Nothing. But Captain Gunner did say our luck would change." He pointed to the 3-legged cat, which now sat curled up in a corner of the booty's galley. When we heard the strange howling, Captain Gunner followed the sound and we found you. I reckon if you hadn't had that furball with you, the captain would have left you there to be eaten by old Greeny Jack. This boat doesn't need 2 more mouths to feed, that's for sure. What's so important about the cat? Al asked. Snakeboot's a sea-going cat, Slicer replied. He reached out and tickled the cat under the chin. Snakeboot, said Owen. There's this legend, explained Mahout. A cat exactly like yours belonged to a famous pirate who died ages ago, called Vicious Victor. A snake bit the cat and the cat chewed its own leg off rather than die from the poison. So Vicious Victor called it Snakeboot. A pirate's cat, said Owen. With a cat like that, said Slicer, we'll get lucky and rich, and he'll keep the rats down. No sooner had Slicer spoken than a strong wind howled through the rigging, and the booty rolled to one side. The plates on the table clattered to the floor. Storm approaching, screamed the boatswain from above. We'd better find you a place to bunk down, urged Mahout. The storms around here can be fierce, and you boys don't look like you have your sea legs yet. The storm raged and the boat rolled and pitched. The dank hold where a couple of hammocks rocked and twisted stank of sewerage and rats. Between stomach-heaving swells and violent sickness, Owen peered at Al with red-rimmed eyes and said, I want to go home. Al agreed, but they were stuck on a boat with what appeared to be pirates in a place called Dragon Blood Islands. Chapter 2, Death Island. When the tossing seas quietened, Al and Owen made their way unsteadily to the deck. Al squinted in the sunlight and looked around. The booty was anchored in a cove, and cliffs towered above them. The storm had wreaked havoc on the ship. The torn mainsail lay on the deck, tattered ropes were jumbled in piles, and seawater sloshed in the scuppers. Captain Gunner, his black frock coat ripped and pantaloons gaping at the knee, strode up and down the deck, inspecting the damage. His gaze fell on the boys as they emerged from the hold. You hopeless little landlubbers, he bawled. Come here. Al and Owen did as they were told. The salt water's got into the biscuits, so there's no food, said Captain Gunner. You good-for-nothings will have to earn your keep while we fix the boat. He handed the boys 2 balls of string with hooks on the ends. Now catch us some fish. On top of the cliffs nearby, coconut palms waved in the breeze. Couldn't we go ashore and get some fruit? Al asked. Captain Gunner took a step back and paled. That's Death Island. No one goes there. Now get to work or I'm gonna feed you back to Greeny Jack. Al and Owen hung the last of the maggoty biscuits from the fish hooks. The fish swam by without a glance. Owen's stomach rumbled loudly. I'm starving, he said. Al surveyed the island nearby, with its banana trees and coconuts. He guessed it would bear enough food for all of them. He spied a cave at the foot of the cliffs. He looked at the booty's dinghy. We could take their dinghy, go through the cave and get some food, he said excitedly. I wouldn't if I were you. The boys jumped. They hadn't seen Mahout come up behind them. No one who's gone through the cave has ever returned, he told them. That's why it's called Death Island. By the evening, they hadn't caught a single fish and hunger pains twisted their guts. I don't care, Al whispered to Owen. In the morning, I'm taking the dinghy and going to look for food. At first light, Al and Owen crept onto the deck, took a fishing knife and began lowering the dinghy. When Mahout appeared, he saw what they were doing and ran over to the boys. If I don't get something to eat soon, I'll be forced to eat my own leg, he said. Mahout took the oars and rowed them to the cave. Once inside, they hauled the dinghy up from the tide line. Several dark tunnels led into the bowels of the island. Which one should we take? Asked Owen. First's as good as any, Al replied, and as he bravely stepped into one of the tunnels. Owen and Mahout followed, feeling their way in the dark. I'll make a mark on the wall, said Al. It will help us get back. The tunnel twisted and turned. Fearing they might get lost, Al was about to turn back when a dim light ahead caught his eye. Brushing cobwebs aside, the boys rushed forward until Owen stumbled and fell. Al stopped. Are you all right? He asked. Owen picked up something from his ground and held it up. I tripped on this, he said. In the weak light, A rotting skull with empty eye sockets leered at them. Horrified, Owen dropped the skull and the boys sprinted for all they were worth. They ran into a sheer-walled cavern where the roof had collapsed, so fingers of gloomy light illuminated the scene before them. Skeletons lay strewn over the cavern floor. The stink of rot and decay filled their nostrils. Al shuddered. "It's a dead man's cave," Owen exclaimed in horror. Mahout stepped towards the rotting skeleton. "Look, he's been stabbed," his voice echoed eerily. As Al inspected the carnage, he realized every skeleton was missing a limb or bore a shocking injury. Swords and pistols lay fallen beside their owners. Bony hands clasped sabres. "Looks like there was a fight between two pirate gangs," said Mahout. "I wonder why," said Al. "Probably fighting over Death Diamond," Mahout replied. "Legend says it's as big as a coconut, as big as a duck's egg, and it's hidden on this island." "I can't stand looking at them," Al said, squirming. Owen's stomach rumbled. "We'll be dead in here too if we don't eat." "Look, a torch!" cried Mahout. He picked up a wooden object. "If we find a flint, we can light it and find our way back quickly." "What's a flint?" asked Al. Mahout stared at him. "Where do you come from? Everyone knows what a flint is." He shook his head. "You two are seriously useless." Since Mahout didn't answer Al's question, the boys began looking for matches. With a shudder, Al patted a dead man's coat. There was nothing in it, so he moved on. The next skeleton wore a gold-embroidered frock coat. A blood-stained knife stuck out of its chest in a death grip. In its rotting hand was a rolled parchment. Al put his hand in the pirate's coat pocket. It was empty. He was about to go to the next body when something made him pull the parchment from the pirate's fingers. He unrolled the paper. It was a map. Among the bloodstains, Death Island and the landing cave were clearly marked. As with several tunnels, the words Diamond and Victor were smudged with age. Al folded the map and put it in his pocket. "Got a flint?" cried Mahout. He struck what looked like a small rock onto a square stone over the ancient torch. A spark came to life and soon the torch was flaming. The boys found other torches and with flaring lights they turned back to the coast and easily followed the marks Al had left on the twisting tunnels. Back at the dinghy, their hunger made them try another tunnel, and in no time the boys were feasting on bananas and mangoes. When their stomachs were full, they loaded their dinghy with fruit and rowed back to the hungry pirates on the booty. Al was surprised at Captain Gunner's angry glares when they returned. "You boys should be keel-hauled," he growled. "You stole the dinghy. If you hadn't got back, we'd have lost our lifeboat." The crew nodded in agreement. "You're going to be punished," he added, as he fell upon the fruit and devoured it with gusto. "Slicer will make sure you don't disobey orders again." In the galley, Slicer handed the boys scrubbing brushes and bottles of vinegar. "Scrub the floors and make them glow," he said, "and when you're finished, scour the pots and pans." He waved his large knife at them, meaning business. Al, Owen and Mahout scrubbed the floors till their knuckles ached. "Captain Gunner is unbelievable," Al thought. "We found food for him. The fine reward we got. I won't show him the treasure map. He doesn't deserve it." Later that day, the booty was patched up, the pirates hauled anchor, and with billowing sails they departed Death Island. But after sailing for a few hours, another storm hit with vengeance. Owen and Al had found their sea legs, so while Slicer was busy manning the sails, they went onto the rolling deck to watch the waves swirl around them and batter the hull. In the shrieking winds, the patched sails tore apart and flapped thunderously. Soon the storm died down and the ship managed to limp towards another island. Chapter 3. The Treasure Map. On the coast, a white-walled town glimmered in the evening sunset. The boys' spirits lifted. "We could find a police station and ring Dad," said Al. "I so want to see my parents," said Owen. But as they approached the shore, their hopes were dashed. Horses pulled carriages, ladies with big skirts walked the cobbled streets, and people were lighting oil lamps. "Are we on a movie set, do you think?" said Owen. "No," Al replied. "I think we're stuck in a pirate land. I don't think we're going to go home after all." When they docked, Captain Gunner addressed the crew from the poop deck. We're gonna be in town for a bit, lads, he said. We've got no money. He looked at the boys. You two, come with me. I've never seen such sad faces. You keep that look and you might get some money begging. He turned to his bosun. Mozzie, you and Slice are going to town and see if you can pick a few pockets. Steal? Cried Owen. Captain Gunner lifted Owen up by the collar till his feet came off the ground. Steal? He mimicked. Of course we're going to steal. We're pirates, aren't we? Al was outraged. They had just been punished for borrowing the dinghy and now they were told they had to steal. He took a brave step forward. There's no way we're going to beg or steal, he declared. Slicer pulled his sword from its scabbard and pointed it menacingly at Al. You and what army will stop us, he threatened. Al looked around desperately. He was in a no-win situation. Owen hung with his feet off the ground as Captain Gunner shook him like a puppy. There's a better way to get money, said Al. We don't have to rob people. He reached into his pocket. We could go get this treasure. He held the map out to the captain. I got it from a dead pirate in the caves of Death Island. Captain Gunner grabbed the map with his spare hand. A huge grin crossed his face. Changed me mind, he chortled as he let Owen fall to the ground. No begging or stealing tonight. Instead, I'm going to get a loan from old Stanley Spong. Then we can have the booty up and running in no time. He smiled at the boys. You can come with me. Your sad faces might make old Stanley give us a better deal. A sharp-faced man who smelled like old underpants patted Owen's head. So these lovely boys found Victor's treasure map. He coughed up some mucus and hawked it into a bowl, then eyed Captain Gunner for a few seconds and said, I believe you. I'll lend you enough to fix the boat, but I want 300% interest or I'll take your boat and sell your crew for slaves. He glanced at the boys, and these two will make good jockeys for the Maharaja's camels. You're a bigger pirate than me, Captain Gunner sighed, looking pained. But as you're the only quick money in town, and it's a deal. The two men spat on their palms and shook hands. When Gunner and the boys left, Stanley waited a few minutes before shutting up shop. He wound his way through some dark alleys until he came to a grimy hotel. What's he up to? To a grimy hotel door. Inside, he met a woman with a hat pulled down over her head so only one side of her face was visible. A drop of moisture hung from her nose, which she wiped away with the sleeve of her dress. Stanley leant over and whispered something. She laughed and her only visible eye glinted greedily. She handed Stanley a handful of money. When Stanley Spong left, the woman made her way to the docks. She boarded a ship called the Tormentor. There she removed her hat. Her scarred face, which sported an eye patch, told of a terrible injury. We sail after treasure, she declared. She turned to the one-legged pirate standing beside her. Sharkbait, I want one of your dogs to watch the booty. Gunner's found out where the Death Diamond is. Hoist the skull and crossbones and make ready. Make ready to sail. When Gunner takes off, we'll follow him and he'll lead us straight to it. Aye, aye, said Sharkbait. The woman glared furiously at her bosun. What did you say? Sorry, Sharkbait replied. I mean, aye, aye, Captain Nell. That's better, she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Chapter 4. Dead Man's Cave. All too soon, Al, Owen and Mahout found themselves back in the Dead Man's Cave. Captain Gunner waved the treasure map with glee, oblivious to the skeletons all around him. The tunnel to the diamond is blocked by this landslip, he said. We're gonna have to shift the rocks. After hours of hard labour, the tunnel leading to the diamond appeared. Everyone ran forward and peered into the darkness. Now, before we set off, remember there are man traps everywhere, warned Gunner, so be careful. Suddenly, a violent war-like shriek split the air behind them. Everyone spun around as the cave filled with evil-looking pirates, led by a hideously scarred woman with an eye patch. Snotty Nell! Captain Gunner cried as his men rushed out with their weapons. But they were too slow. After a brief scuffle, they were completely overpowered. Give me the treasure map or I'll slay you all, Snotty Nell shouted, waving her knife. No one heeded her demand, so she seized Mahout by the hair, tipped his head back and held her knife against his neck. Give us the map or I'll slit the boy's throat. Not very nice. Her actions galvanized Captain Gunner. "Leave him alone," he called out. "It's in my coat pocket. Take it." Snotty Nell grabbed the treasure map. "The diamond's mine," she crowed triumphantly. "You'll never find it and live," yelled Captain Gunner. Snotty Nell glared at the map. "You're right. There are dangerous man-traps." She thought for a moment. Then her eye narrowed. "What I'll do is get you and your crew to help me find the diamond. You can go first and test out the tunnels." She laughed maliciously. "Ain't I the generous one?" She turned to her bosun. "Sharkbait, you stay here as you're so slow. Guard some hostages." She pointed to Al and Owen. Sharkbait wobbled a little on his peg leg as he grabbed the boys and forced them to sit. Then he dragged Mahout over and lashed them together. "If one of you rascals even thinks of trying to escape," Snotty Nell informed Gunner's crew, "Sharkbait will kill these lovely boys." She poked her sword into the captain's back. "Let's get a move on then," she ordered.